Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving into a world that you might not think is super exciting right off the bat, but trust me, this one's got some really interesting stuff in it. We were talking about Indian fast food. And specifically, we're going to be talking about the story of Tariq, who is the founder of Jumbo King. And you might not have heard of Jumbo King, but we are going to get into all that. And it's really fascinating story, full of insights for, I think, anyone who's trying to build a business or a brand.
Yeah, what really stood out to me about this story is how counterintuitive a lot of Tariq's thinking is. You know, he wasn't trying to recreate McDonald's. He was really looking at, okay, what's something that's already popular here in India? How can I build a brand around that? And he chose to focus on the very humble Veda pav.
Okay, so for our listeners who haven't had the pleasure of trying a Veda pav, paint us a picture. What is this? Sure.
So a Veda pav, it's a fried spiced potato patty that's inside of a bun. And it's incredibly popular street food all over India. And Tariq, in his own words, was, obsessed with brands. He read all these business autobiographies. He really wanted to create a brand. And initially he wanted to create, something really big and flashy. But then he had this kind of realization that, this very humble street food was a huge market and it was completely unbranded.
So he saw an opportunity to elevate the ordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where his thinking gets really interesting, I think. Everyone else was looking at McDonald's or Subway and trying to replicate their success. And he thought, well, what if I could be the McDonald's of Veda pav?
Genius, but I'm sure it wasn't all, sunshine and roses from there. He must have hit some bumps along the way.
Well, absolutely. In fact, he, in his first attempt to start a food business, he lost a significant amount of money, about 5.5 million rupees.
Oof.
Yeah, not a small amount at all, especially back then.
Yeah.
And, but in true entrepreneurial spirit, he turned that failure into what he calls his real MBA. He learned some incredibly valuable lessons from that experience. And one of the things that he realized is that it wasn't enough to have a great recipe. You had to understand the customer's perception.
Okay, customer perception. I'm interested. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so he talks about this aha moment he had when he was observing his first Veda pav shop that he opened. And he realized that if the customer received the Veda pav at a very specific temperature, like 90 degrees Celsius, they perceived it as being much fresher and tastier, higher quality.
So just that little detail, the temperature, could completely change how they viewed the product.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And, it's not about, tricking the customer. It's about understanding those subtle cues that really make a difference in their experience.
Yeah, it's all about the customer experience.
Exactly.
So he starts to expand, he's opening more shops, but he makes this interesting decision to not add a lot of things to the menu.
Right.
Which seems counterintuitive because usually you think more variety, more options for people is better.
And everyone told him he was crazy. You need to have more products, you need to have more variety. But he had this rule: 100 products, 10 kilometers. Versus 10 products, 1,000 kilometers.
Okay, break that down for me. What does that mean?
It's about focus. He realized that by trying to offer everything, he was limiting his ability to expand and scale.
Interesting.
Because every new product you add, that's more ingredients, more training, more complexity, and it really limits how far you can go.
But by focusing on fewer products, he was actually able to expand further.
Exactly. He understood that every choice you make has a trade-off.
Right.
And he chose to prioritize growth and efficiency over having a really expansive menu. And to take that efficiency even further, he actually drew inspiration from Henry Ford.
Oh.
The assembly line.
Really?
Yeah.
For Veda pav?
He designed the Jumbo King kitchens for maximum output. Mm-hmm. Every movement was optimized. So they could just be churning out these Veda pavs with incredible speed and precision.
It's like taking something that's, so simple and then applying this kind of, I don't want to say corporate, but like this really smart business thinking behind it to make it even bigger.
Yeah, it's like this beautiful blend of tradition and innovation, right?
I like it. But then, as Jumbo King is growing and finding success, he runs into this other interesting hurdle. And it's not about operations or anything like that. It's about the Veda pav itself.
Right.
So tell me, what was the issue and how did that lead to this, shift towards burgers?
So there are these two aha moments.
Okay, give them to me.
So one of his shops happened to be right next to this burger place. And he noticed that even though Jumbo King also had burgers on the menu at the time, people were still flocking to the burger place.
Interesting.
So he starts asking around, why? And the answer was pretty simple. Perception. People just saw Jumbo King as the Veda pav place.
Okay, so even if their burgers were good, the brand itself was kind of pigeonholed.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And this brings us to the second aha moment. So he was exploring the idea of carrying this new brand of yogurt, and the founder kept calling it, Shri yogurt. And at first he thought he was mispronouncing Greek yogurt.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
But then he realized, you know what? The name Vadapav, it came with certain price expectations, a certain image.
Yeah.
And it was limiting their ability to, charge higher prices for, arguably a more premium product.
So even though a burger and a Vitapav aren't that different, right, in terms of like the work that goes into it.
Preparation, ingredients.
Yeah. But the name itself, burger, came with all this, like you said, baggage and expectation that Vadapav didn't have.
Exactly. And this was a huge realization for him. He realized that the name was actually more important than the operational complexity of, adding a new item.
Wow. So after 16 years of building this Vadapav empire, he makes this big decision to pivot and really focus on burgers. And this is where the franchising part of the story comes in. Okay. All right. Well, let's take a quick pause here to digest all this, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the franchising part of the Jumbo King story. All right. So we are back, and we are ready to dig into the franchising side of this Jumbo King story. Which is fascinating. And you mentioned earlier that Digup himself, he loves franchising. He's a student of it.
Yeah, he talks about how much he loves brands like McDonald's and Subway and how he really studied their models. But he also makes this really important distinction between different types of franchise models.
Okay, so not all franchises are created equal.
Not at all. So at the most basic level, you've got company-owned and company-operated. Think Starbucks, right? Where the brand controls everything. And then you've got franchise-owned and franchise-operated, which is what Jumbo King does. So in this model, the individual franchisee, they actually own and operate that location. And then everything else is kind of a variation on those two themes.
So why franchise at all? Why not just do it all yourself?
Right. That's the big question.
Yeah.
And Digup's answer is really interesting. He says it comes down to motivation.
Okay, interesting.
He believes that a franchise owner, someone with skin in the game, is always going to be more motivated to succeed than, a salaried manager.
Because it's their own business, right?
Exactly. It's the difference between building something for yourself versus just collecting a paycheck.
That makes sense, but it seems like it would be really important to choose the right franchisees then.
Absolutely.
So what does he look for in a potential Jumbo King franchisee?
So it's not just about money. In fact, he has a really strict no loans policy.
Oh, wow.
He wants people who are financially secure, they're not over-leveraged, they're fully committed, and they have to be ready to work.
Oh, wow.
This isn't like a, buy it and then sit back and relax type of thing.
Yeah.
He wants people who are going to be hands-on, they're going to learn the business, they're going to be involved.
So you can't just buy a Jumbo King franchise and then go hang out on the beach.
Well, I mean, maybe eventually.
Maybe eventually.
But he would argue that the real reward is in the building.
Yeah.
And the creation of something successful.
That makes sense. But I'm sure you know as well as I do, there are plenty of franchisers out there that kind of overpromise and underdeliver.
Oh, for sure.
So how does Jumbo King ensure that their franchisees are actually successful?
So, Digup, he talks about creating this win-win partnership with his franchisees. And he does this by providing what he calls the 10x advantages of franchising.
Okay, 10x advantages.
Yeah, he actually wrote a whole book about this.
Of course he did.
But the most important advantage, especially in the food industry, is the supply chain.
Right, because they're buying in bulk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he's able to negotiate incredible deals for everything, from the ingredients, the patties, the buns, the sauces, all of that.
So they're getting higher quality ingredients, probably at a lower price than they could get on their own.
Exactly.
Wow.
And it goes beyond that. They also handle a lot of the marketing.
Okay.
So instead of each individual franchisee trying to figure out marketing on their own,
right,
they pool their resources and they run these citywide campaigns.
Yeah, that makes sense because they've got more buying power, more just everything power.
Exactly.
That's really smart.
And it's not just marketing. They provide a ton of operational support as well.
Like what?
So IT infrastructure, training programs for staff. They even help with things like store design and equipment selection.
Wow, they're really like holding their hands through the whole process.
Yeah, Digup's background is in hotel management.
Okay.
So he really understands the importance of systems and processes.
Yeah. Okay, so this is all sounding amazing, but I want to talk about what happens when things don't go well.
Right.
Because I'm sure, even with the best systems, sometimes a franchise might struggle.
Absolutely.
So what happens then?
So Digup acknowledges that there are really two big risk factors: location and the franchise themselves.
So you can have the best burger in the world. But if you open up in the wrong location,
It's not going to work.
it's not going to work.
Right.
And I guess, on the other hand, you could be in the best location. And I guess even in the perfect location, a franchisee might not be cut out for the demands of running their own business.
Yeah, some people are just not meant to be entrepreneurs. That's okay.
Right.
But what I appreciate about DGUP is that he takes responsibility for those risks as well. He doesn't just, wash his hands of it if a franchisee is struggling.
So what does that look like? Do they, send in a team to help turn things around?
Pretty much. They have a dedicated team that monitors the performance of all the franchises. And if they see one that's struggling, they'll step in and provide support. So, for example, if they determine that the location really is the issue, they might help the franchise renegotiate their lease or even find a new location.
Wow, that's going above and beyond.
Yeah, they're really invested in the success of their franchisees.
That's impressive. But what about the franchise themselves? If they're just not putting in the effort, how do you even fix that?
So DGUP talks about how he's developed a kind of sixth sense for this from years of experience. He can tell just by observing a store whether the franchisee is truly committed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's looking at things like, are they present in the day-to-day operations? Is the staff well trained? Are they paying attention to the details?
So he can tell if someone's heart is really in it.
Exactly. And if they identify a franchisee who's not fully committed, they'll try to provide guidance and support. But in some cases, they might have to have a tough conversation and say, hey, maybe this isn't the right fit for you.
That makes sense. So it's about honesty and transparency.
Exactly. And I think that's something that's often missing in the franchising world.
Yeah, it can feel very transactional.
Right. But DGUP is trying to build something different. He wants his franchisees to succeed, but he also needs them to be fully invested in the process.
I like that. So we've covered a lot of ground here today, from the humble Vadapav to the world of franchising.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
If you had to pick one major takeaway from DGUP's story, what would it be?
I think the biggest lesson here is the power of focus. DGUP was laser focused on creating a simple, scalable product. He was obsessed with operational efficiency. And he understood the importance of building a strong brand. And all that came together to create something truly remarkable.
It's like that saying, do one thing and do it really well.
Exactly.
And what I find really inspiring is that even with all his success, DGUP still considers himself a student. He's always learning, always adapting.
It's a great reminder that no matter how much you achieve, there's always more to learn.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, DGUP leaves us with a thought-provoking question. He believes that in the future, everything will become a brand. So we put that question to you, our listeners. What seemingly ordinary product or service do you think has the potential to be the next big thing? What would it take to build that brand? Let us know. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the world of Jumbo King and the man who dared to dream big, one Vadapav at a time. Thanks for listening, everyone.